again, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Blumira Briefings, your weekly download of the most important headlines for keeping your organization safe with some helpful context added. We've got a really hot week of news for you here, and not just because we have some good stories. It's been blisteringly hot outside, and in the studio that I'm in, the temperature is higher than relatable sports references streak. So today we are going to go through and start, as usual, with our critical update stories. Then we're going to take a look at our most changed trends and talk about those over the last week. And then there's a couple of interesting general security articles that we'll be diving into. Today, I'm joined by my teammate, Jay Goulet, a familiar face to folks that have been watching for a while. Hey, Jake.
Hey, how's it going? It's hot here, so I had to lose my hacker hoodie, but Taylor's making up with it with his Blumira hoodie. So we've got at least one hoodie represented.
Exactly.
I'm Taylor, first time, and I am wearing a hoodie. It's also really hot here, but I happen to be in the basement, and it's just the coolest place in the house. So, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I should have done that. Instead, I went upstairs, and it's even warmer up here. I should have gone into the basement. I'm not wearing anything. I have a winery shirt on, if that's any consolation.
There we go.
We also had a boil advisory, so I'm just...
Oh, dear.
Yeah, I'm only sticking to drinking wine during the day now.
That seems fair. This should be an interesting episode. I can't wait. So we'll dive right in with our updates. First up this week, Veeam patches a new CVE. It's a remote code execution bug that got a 9.9 CVSS for their backup and replication system. This is CVE 2025-23-121. It impacts earlier version 12 and 13 versions of the Veeam backup server. This research was shared by CodeWhite, GmbH, and Watchtower. And as Rapid7 noted, a similar patch in March to fix an earlier vulnerability, 23.120, which was a deserialization of untrusted data, was a very similar vulnerability. This could be leveraging the same method. They also patched a less severe, but still worth paying attention to vulnerability, a 7.2 for authenticated user with backup operator role, being able to modify backup jobs, which could lead to arbitrary code execution, as well as a vulnerability to modify directory contents. We'll have links to both the Veeam advisory and Rapid7's earlier article on the March note, as well as to the CVE page itself. For mitigation, before we dive into our discussion, they're recommending to update to backup and replication 12.3.2 immediately, and to update the Veeam agent for Windows to 6.3.2. And they are saying, do not wait for regular patch cycles. Apply those updates immediately. I noticed that in that article also, Rapid said that 20% of the response cases that they worked on in 2024 involved either access or exploitation of Veeam. So I think to kick us off, this is a call for an immediate update, not going through the normal kind of change management cycle. How can teams plan for and test their plan for when there is occasion that you need to kind of shortcut that change management cycle?
My biggest recommendation is have an SOP for these kinds of things. It's surprising whenever some kind of advisory comes out whenever you have to patch. You can never plan for when things are going to be vulnerable, but you can plan for at least being able to respond to those things. So my biggest thing, like you said, to kind of sidestep change control, but change control also doesn't need to be a crazy process. At my last company, we had a change control sheet where even if we were doing crazy critical things, we would list what are we changing, why are we changing it, and it would be very quick peer review process. So there's very small instances, in my opinion, where you should sidestep change control, because even in these critical ones where we're getting like things that need to be acted on sooner rather than later, you can still have a change control process that works in a somewhat fast process. And the best thing about that change control is it kind of gives you an idea of like I said, the things you're trying to change, why you're changing them, why you're applying those updates outside of your regular schedules. And it also forces you to list out like any potential risks or outages you might experience as because of going outside of that normal patch cycle. And it also prompts you, at least in my experience, because we had a sheet that we would fill out for these kinds of things. It prompts you for a backup plan if something goes sideways. So that's always my favorite. And then the other thing too is we always did peer reviews on these change control sheets. So it would not only be your butt on the line if something went wrong that was outside of documentation, but it also puts a little bit of like a fire under the butt of the person reviewing to make sure that, you've got all your ducks in a row, you're ready to go outside of our change control process, and it's for a good reason. So yeah, I would say get your SOP sorted beforehand, so that way when these things do come up, you're not running around like wondering, should I take things down? Should I do this or that? You have a plan in place all ready to go.
It kind of covers the, never released a prod on Fridays kind of thing too. You can include that in your SOP, where if it's something that is really important, maybe it is worth releasing in a time where you don't normally.
Yeah, and part of that whole conversation, part of that whole SOP can literally be setting those thresholds. Like, how do we have the discussion around something that does need to be outside of our patch cycle? Like, because not everything needs to be done outside of patch cycle. So there's like probably a couple people you can get into a room and determine if something's urgent enough, and then start that process. Or maybe you guys decide that it can wait. Like, it's all about communication and just having these things in place beforehand.
And Jake, Taylor, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a little bit different of an angle than just a change control background, but or patch management. But from a threat perspective, I feel like the time to exploit for a lot of these is increasing pretty rapidly, and so having some sort of stop around these and your patch management in general is probably something like super vital, just more and more to have implemented in plan.
Absolutely. That's a great point to add. We've had a lot of stories over the last several weeks that are showing this kind of shrinking time between public announcement or public disclosure of a vulnerability and seeing that vulnerability exploited in the wild, taking advantage of folks that haven't patched or updated yet. Jake, you just touched on the importance of the backup strategy and having a documented process there. I know that, we talk an awful lot about a 3-2-1 or a 3-2-1-1-0 or a 4-3-2 backup strategy. Given the kind of prevalence of how much Rapid is seeing Veeam specifically targeted, not to include other backup solutions that may be involved in incidents. What can orgs do outside of that 3 backups, 2 media, 1 offsite kind of approach?
My biggest piece of advice is testing your backups. I know we've said this at several episodes at this point, but you can't really be sure that your backups are working unless you actually try to restore from a backup. And then most importantly too is do you have all the right people in place? Is the person that normally does the restores, what if they're on vacation? Just try to think about things. And I think this is a streak of episodes where I'm always saying tabletop things, just because it creates so many, you start to see gaps when you're doing tabletop exercises, and you can start to address those. So yeah, I would say tabletop things. Try to imagine yourself in situations where maybe you've been ransomware. Can you recover from that ransom? If your Veeam server is caught in the ransomware, can you pull down from an offline backup or a cloud backup? What does that process look like? And you're actually trying to do those things, and most importantly, document your recovery processes as well. Because like I said, if whoever normally does those recoveries, if they're on vacation, they're just not available, you want to be able to offload that work and make sure it's something that anybody can recover, kind of step in and handle.
Amanda, I was kind of counting down how long until we got a mention of tabletops. I know that's a topic that's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, that's actually how Jake and I met.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was in tabletop training.
Now, I know that while we've got you here, kind of one of the things that I've commonly heard in regards to why folks haven't done tabletops or don't have a process for doing so is not really knowing where to start, or if they're going to be able to get the buy-in to get all of the people participating that they really would want to in the event of a live scenario. Do you have any tips on, what the step in the right direction to start with could be if folks in an organization are having a hard time getting a full exercise bootstrapped?
Literally anything.
Yeah.
Starting with anything that's in the news, like literally anything we talk about here. Pick the last time you saw an alert in your organization and thought, oh crap, this could be bad. Maybe it wasn't, but then just go down the road if something was different and something had happened that was really bad. You don't even have to have a full program. You can just literally book 30 minutes on a calendar with people that you normally work with day to day and get just the ball rolling on some kind of internal exercise.
Yeah, and I mean, these stories, they're already written for us. Most of the time, you don't need to be creative. You just go to the most recent news, and a lot of times you'll get a story that you can use to be XYZ, Cisco got breached or whatever. Just go through that, what happened to them, and be well, let's pretend that it happened to me. Also, I could see this being a really good use case for some kind of AI, if it's ChatGPT or something. Did I take your idea?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, this is a perfect use case for AI to just kind of just tell it, be give me, these are the things I'm trying to test. Give me an example scenario where I've got to test these things.
I have this infrastructure. I have this, we're in this industry. We worry about these things. You can throw all that in there.
Moving on down to our next story in the list, we've got a update for Citrix to patch critical vulnerabilities in their NetScaler ADC and Gateway. This is CVE 2025-5777, which is a 9.3 CVSS, and that is a out of bounds read due to insufficient input validation in NetScaler's management interface, which could allow token theft from internet-facing NetScaler devices. It affects NetScaler Gateway 13.1 and 14.1 versions before the patch. Full details are in the advisory release. And NetScaler ADC 12.1 and 13.1 FIPS. They also noted in the advisory that versions 12.1 and 13 are both end of life at this point and should be updated as soon as possible. There were a couple of other CVEs mentioned, an 8.7 for improper access control and a 9.4 for a buffer overflow. Actually, that one is from 2023 and was covered in the news as quote unquote Citrix bleed, but shares some similarities in the vulnerability that was leveraged. For mitigation, you want to upgrade to ADC and Gateway 14.1-43.56 or 13.1-58.32 and upgrade your FIPS version to 13.1, 37.234 and 12.1, 55-327. Now, if you didn't write all of those down as I was talking, don't worry, we're going to link to the original source. You can go through the list there as well. One of the pieces in the advisory was to kill any active sessions and initiate a reconnect because of that potential for token theft. We talked a few weeks ago about the kind of potential value of a periodic forced relogin or reconnection. Is this another point in kind of the pro column for doing that periodic disconnection and reauthentication?
Yeah, I think in this case, they're recommending it just because obviously if you've got session tokens out there that are stolen already, you want to kind of refresh those. So even if people are already doing session disconnection or some kind of automated process, I would still follow this guidance because you just got to at least you can say you did everything that the vendor told you to do to mitigate. And sometimes those automated features are on a specific schedule, and that can vary from org to org. So you just want, in this case, even if I did have the automated disconnect thing, I would probably go ahead and just do it myself anyways, just to make sure all those are cleaned up. I think in terms of like the bigger conversation about like periodic session disconnection overall, it's recommended in like a million different frameworks. So like, and is it the most essential thing on all of those frameworks? Not really, but it's just another one of those little like layers. And I think the session expiration is not something that's really explained all that well in these frameworks. I think the biggest problem is like people have a hard time linking that particular like piece of advice to like why is it bad. These frameworks they don't do a lot of explaining about like what could happen if one of these, like if you let these sessions go on forever. Like they don't link that kind of value to how it could be used in a bad way. So I think the most important thing I wanted to cover is the reason you would want to do session like disconnect or some kind of automated feature like that is there's usually a physical aspect. So if somebody walks away from their computer, you can mitigate insider threat and physical access. So if their screen locks, that's like a kind of like a basic way to think about it. Or if not even just thinking about their screen locking, if it logs them out of like, I don't know, Google Drive or something after a certain amount of minutes of inactivity or something. That's a little crazy, but that's the example I'm going to give. But that would be like one case of like physical access, somebody walking up to your computer and like trying to access something while you're away. Another thing is in this case, limiting impact of session hijacking. So if somebody is able to steal your session token, and we talk about session tokens a lot in like 365 compromises, but session tokens also exist in Windows and inside like when you're doing remote desktop connections, that kind of stuff. And those can also be stolen. So if you kill the session, you kill that session token from working on that existing session. So that's another way to kind of like, if somebody gets into your environment, you can prevent an attack of abusing like any stolen sessions if you have a timeout on those. And then it also technically falls under principle of least privilege, because you want to be able to give users access only to the things that they need. And then also importantly is only when they need them. So if they're done using something, you can effectively cancel out that session or whatever, however they're accessing that data. And if they need to access it again, have them re-authenticate. I mean, this is a tough thing to solve, but I think trying to explain like how sessions can be abused this way is a good way to like, it gives responders and people in the shoes of like trying to respond to these things like an idea of like why it's important that we set these timeouts and these automatic disconnects.
We see again here the really common advice that comes up a lot. If you're using end of life hardware, make sure that you replace it or that you update to a currently supported version. And I feel like that's kind of that low-hanging fruit advice that when you actually go to implement it can be a little bit trickier to plan for, not just because, you have to plan for downtime, but also you need to have a system in place for reviewing where you have end-of-life equipment. Some vendors are going to be very proactive about letting you know when sunset dates are coming up. Others may not be as communicative. So do we have any tips on how to build a process around inventorying or reviewing for end-of-life tech as they're kind of doing maintenance and auditing of their stack?
I mean, I think you kind of hit on it when you were asking the question, right? Like having a process is the first is the first step. Catching up when you don't have one is the worst.
Agreed.
I've been in those organizations where you didn't have any process before. There was no refresh on hardware. There was no checking on vendors that you had the software for. There was no list of literally anything. Catching up on that can take a very long time. But having the process in place and just having it be a continual process that you're using some kind of third-party asset management to keep track of all of those things, and doing audits once a year just to make sure you've not missed anything. Like stuff will fall through the cracks pretty much no matter what, but keeping abreast of the new information coming out from the vendors that you at least know you have is really important.
Yeah, I think asset management is tough because it usually relies. It's not just one person that can manage asset management. It's like a team effort in like the biggest sense, because you need to almost like instill that like culture of like being like caring about those kinds of things. So it is a tough problem to solve. You need to definitely establish a baseline just to understand where you're at in terms of like your actual coverage. And then you need to have that process, like Amanda was saying, of continuously documenting new and replaced tech. You could also, like, if you're short on resources, you could also just like figure out what's your most important things that you're trying to track. Maybe you're not super concerned about replacing somebody's laptop or somebody's computer, but you focus more on like the edge devices on the edge of your network, or maybe you're focusing on like critical infrastructure, switches, like that kind of stuff. And you focus less on the like smaller low hanging fruit. Like if you've got all the time in the world and all the resources, sure, try to track all that stuff, but like try to think about the things that actually matter to like when you're looking at like your external exposure. Because ideally, I mean, I think everybody says like, it's funny because this is one of those things that comes up in like the Reddit comments all the time. It's like, well, you shouldn't be running end of life like hardware. And it's like, stuff like that is just unrealistic. I get that it happens. It's going to happen. Prepare for it to happen to you. And sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. You've got to use that end of life hardware. And in that case, I would say try to think of alternate mitigations. Think about ways like, can you rip this thing out entirely instead of replacing it? Can you put some other kind of like authentication or something else in front of this device or wherever to kind of like contain it or secure it in a way that's like meets your standards, but also you don't need to replace it because we're ultimately like beholden to sometimes like the budgets that are given to us and other constraints that may not let us replace end of life devices all the time.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we wouldn't ever have to deal with end of life hardware, but in a perfect world, we probably wouldn't need to have security policies in place because we wouldn't have to worry about that kind of thing. No, there's a reason why like every framework has some version of audit or inventory or prioritize as the step zero, first step in the process. And Amanda, to what you were saying about evolving towards having that documented process, even if it's imperfect progress. It sounds like the kind of thing that you could get some advice on in a handbook for security, perhaps of the defensive sort. I'm very slyly making a reference to an excellent book, by the way, that Amanda is a co-author on that everybody should check out, called The Defensive Security Handbook. There's some great guidance in there for moving towards documenting and building process when you may not have a whole lot of that pre-existing. She wouldn't plug it, so I wanted to make sure to do that on her behalf.
I wouldn't, definitely. I'm not even in my office, so I don't even have a copy.
Going on to our next story, and Jake made a great point here. This is a twofer of two sets of patches that we do want to make mention of. They were not jointly released, however. So there's a couple of high severity vulnerabilities that were patched by Cisco as well as by Atlassian in their respective product lines. The Cisco patch was for a denial of service attack that targeted Meraki MX and Z devices. The vulnerability was an initialization error. So a VPN connection, as it is established, a sustained attack could prevent that connection from being established, effectively making the VPN unavailable for all users. Obviously not a great situation to be in. And that will affect about 24 of the MX and Z series devices. It has been resolved in MX firmware versions 18.107.13, 2.11.6, and 19.1.8. There was also a moderate severity bug in the CLAM AV universal disk format processing. Cisco said they're not aware of these being exploited, but advise an immediate patch anyway. Also, Atlassian released a bundle of patches to address an improper authorization in Spring, a denial of service flaw in the Netty framework, as well as a path traversal bug related to WebMVC.fn and the WebFlux.fn frameworks. Going down to mitigations, they advise those firmware updates, and Atlassian is advising adding the latest patches for Bamboo, Bitbucket, Confluence, Crowd, and Jira, as well as updating any third-party dependencies to those patched versions. So I think First, we're talking about a potential issue with accessibility through the VPN. We've definitely seen in general within the industry a shift away from VPN-based remote access towards some newer or more user-friendly options, like a SSO portal through a reverse proxy, something like that. What would be a good backup recommendation? So for organizations that do still rely on that VPN system for remote access, what would be a step in the right direction to have sort of a emergency fallback, if not a full replacement for that system? Say somebody is running this as an exercise, taking inspiration from this story.
Yeah, this is one that's dangerous. This is not one that I would advise you getting. Like, if you have one VPN solution, I would not advise getting another as kind of like a backup. A lot of times I see some organizations falling back on TeamViewer or Splashtop. I can tell you that's not the answer. I think in most cases you just want to understand like the impact that you would have if you did take the VPN down, because that alone might tell you if you need a backup. If your employees or whoever you're helping can access 90% of their data without the help of a VPN, then just tell them I know it's hard to just tell people things, but just tell them like, hey, you're going to be down for about an hour. You're going to lose access to XYZ. I think communication can go a long way with these kinds of outages, and just let them know like, hey, we're trying to patch this critical severity thing. Here's what you're going to lose access to. Work on other things for the next hour. Worded a little bit more nicely than that, a little bit more professionally. But that's kind of the idea. Just like communication, keep people updated. And then when things are restored again, just kind of let them know that things are back up.
Another good use for ChatGPT.
Yeah, right. Word this professionally.
Yes.
Another thing I wanted to say too, a lot of these big VPN solutions have some way to do like a professional failover. So you could have one system down while you patch that, and then your failover system. And when I say failover, I mean like literally two devices. In my experience, in my past job, we used multiple sonic walls configured in like a failover state. So that way, if one did fail, or if we did need to patch one of the particular, like the sonic wall itself, we would let the other one handle the traffic, and then we would bring that other one back up after it's patched, and then let the other one back down. So there's graceful ways to do it, but I would say don't look at other solutions just to solve that problem. That's going to expand your attack surface, and a VPN's like a big thing nowadays for people to get access to a lot of things they shouldn't.
Great point there on the most common uses for VPNs these days. And we touched on, or I mentioned, I should say, by we, I mean I, mentioned that there's a convenience factor to why folks have started to move away from VPN-based remote access. Are there other major reasons why orgs are moving away from that type of perimeterized remote access approach that we want to touch on?
I think the biggest thing is just like you've got dominance of the application platforms like 365 or GCP. You don't need to be in the office anymore, especially since COVID changed the entire, that was just one of those things that I think culturally COVID changed like pretty much everybody, but it had a huge impact on like working from home and understanding how to do that. I pulled a lot of long nights when COVID came around just to get a lot of customers up and running on VPN who didn't have a VPN previously. So I think that kind of like was the catalyst for forcing a lot of companies to operate differently. And I think a lot of companies also found newer and better ways to work, or it also forced certain upgrades that they may have been deferring over a certain amount of time. So yeah, I think that was a big push to like moving people to 365. Also, if you've ever managed customers who use VPNs or like use VPN clients themselves, that alone can be kind of annoying because you need to have the VPN client installed. It needs to be updated. You can have a rash, like a whole big like bucket of tickets just related to people having issues connecting to a VPN. Certain hotels will block VPN access. Like that alone is a big enough kind of like excuse to go to some of these other providers like 365 or GCP.
Well, I do want to touch on our most changed trends of the week, but we'll try and fly through these and pick out kind of the most notable standouts, because there are a couple of general security news stories that we still definitely want to get to. Starting out with our threats, we have another appearance for dumping lsas.exe memory using proc dump. You'd say processor, but proc if you're saying proc dump, I guess. Mimikatz process creation, a AWS guard duty critical IAM anomalous behavior, suspicious service launch in Defender for endpoint, and anomalous honeypot access round out our top 5 there. Any thoughts, panel, on any of these we want to draw attention to?
The dump LSAS memory using proc dump was one that stuck out to me, mostly because I guess I really just wanted to highlight it because some people might not understand how that works. So the 10,000 foot view is you can use proc dump to create a dump file itself from LSAS. So you just run proc dump and point at LSAS, and then what happens is that creates a dump file that could contain things like plain text passwords, NTLM hashes, or even Kerberos tickets. So the idea is that somebody, if they get on your machine, they're able to make that dump file. They will either exfiltrate that and just take that on their own, and maybe they won't try to access it on the device, or sometimes they'll use Mimikatz or some other tool right on the device using that dump file to access those secrets, those passwords directly there. So it's just one way of accessing passwords that are in memory, because all that's baked into LSAS. Another one I wanted to highlight too.
That proc dump too comes as a package with sysinternals, right? So that's from Microsoft, not an actual attacker tool.
Oh yeah,
something that people can use for that and other things.
Yeah, so it's one of those tools, like Amanda said, that it's built into Windows, so the attacker can guarantee that it's going to be there when they land on a machine. So why not use it? The other one I wanted to highlight as well was Mimikatz process creation or command run. So we just talked about Mimikatz and what it does. It's primarily a post-exploitation tool used by attackers and penetration testers to extract plain text passwords, hashes, and Kerberos tickets from memory on Windows. So it's a tool dedicated to credential theft and lateral movement. And the biggest reason I want to highlight this one is because it's not one that we see all that often. The Mimikatz process creation or command run is very specific about what it's looking for, and you're not really going to find false positives on this one. So this one that if you see this coming up, this is something that you should be investigating right away.
Moving on down to suspects. Again, suspects category is where this could represent malicious activity, but doesn't meet the threshold of what we consider high confidence that we would classify as a threat. In this category this week, again, all of these were new appearances in the last week. We had multiple failed logins, domain account addition via net commands, fine string password discovery activity, 100% CPU usage on Palo Alto, and a unblocked crypto mining alert in Cisco Umbrella.
Yeah, this one, the fine string password discovery activity, this one is just another one I wanted to talk about because people might not know how fine string is abused, but it's just a way for attackers to use, again, more built-in utilities, Windows, to search for files or contents of files that may include the word passwords. Usually the attackers will define some kind of string that they want to look for, and it'll be like password or credential or something like that. And they use fine string to try and find that in a file directory, something like that, in shared files or even local files on a machine. So that's how that's used. They're trying to find credential files or saved passwords, a spreadsheet on somebody's desktop. The dump LSAS memory using WER, that's the Windows error. I forgot what it stands for exactly. The Windows reporting. It does the same thing as proc dump, where you can create a dump file from the WER fault.exe, which is another built-in utility for Windows. That very similar. Creates a dump file that can be exfiltrated, and that dump file has the LSAS dump, so it's got all those passwords in it and stuff like that. And then also domain account addition via net commands. This one I'm sure everybody's aware of, but like this one we see happen all the time in actual attacks because people are threat actors are hopping on machines. They're making accounts to like for persistence. Because if you don't catch them making those new accounts, they'll come back and use those accounts later after you've gotten rid of them and didn't realize that they made an account. So this is one that, I mean, I think I've used as an administrator just to make a new user here and there. You just use the net command, but it also is not one that you can just discount either. You got to make sure that people are doing it legitimately.
And there's tools that use it in the back end too, right? Like some of these things all together, like we've seen password dumps happen from third-party tools before, which is always fun. But I think just the theme of the briefings this week has to do with passwords, I guess. Password.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that.
Dumping, yeah.
I think too from like an investigative standpoint, kind of adding to what both Jake and Amanda said, that knowing what those net commands look like, what might be expected versus not, is just huge because Jake has noted the prevalence of that in attacks, and is mind-boggling. So knowing what that looks like, knowing what it's supposed to be in your environment, and thoroughly reviewing when you see that is, I think, really, really key.
On to risks, and risks are the detections that may represent malicious activity. However, it's a lower threshold than suspect. And typically, these are things that we see more as potentially concerning, as the name would suggest, risky situations in your environment that you want to try and remediate before they become problems. And looking at that category for this week, we see a mass deletion of M365 objects, a Linux logging service shut down. Jake, I know you have thoughts on that one. We'll get to in a sec. Google Workspace login from outside of Canada, and 500 or more file deletions inside of 15 minutes in SharePoint.
Yeah, the Linux logging service shutdown one I wanted to note just because that's more than just an operational. There's a reason it's put in the risk category, and that's because some attackers will shut down the logging service. So to disable your visibility, disable any alerts that you may have that are related to your logs. So it is something that, while it is good to know, because sometimes there can be an issue with the logging service, it shuts down. There could be an operational reason. It could be also like a malicious attacker getting into your system, trying to disable that stuff and disable your visibility.
We touched on AI use potentially to help defenders a little bit earlier in today's session. As we have seen in several of our prior weeks, defenders are not the only side of the equation that are making heavier adoption of AI tools. There's a new report out from the Identity Theft Resource Center on what they're seeing in 2025 trends. They base this report on identity crimes that are reported. The period was April 1st of last year to March 31st of this year. Some kind of high-level stats. The total number of reports fell by almost a third, 31%. But victims reporting multiple incidents increased, almost doubling from 15 to 24%. The most common scams were impersonation, 34% were impersonators, 10% were employment-based fraud, 9% were Google Voice-based scams. And the targets of these scams were 51% businesses, followed by 21% financial institutions, and in third place, government agencies, as with last year, although 32% less than last year was found. The most common tactics used: phishing emails, SEOing fake websites, posting search engine ads with fake customer service numbers. That'll come up in just a moment. And financial impersonation is typically based on inbound calls. Threat actors are using AI tools to more quickly and effectively launch their scams, making it easier to clone or fake websites. And the report notes that fewer reports doesn't mean fewer instances, just fewer reports. Of the identity misuse, 53% of those cases involved account takeover, and 36% were linked to new account creation, typically for credit cards. So for our discussion here, businesses are the most commonly impersonated entities. So what are some things that businesses can do to try and better validate or qualify communications from them to their customers or to their partners are genuine?
I think the biggest thing is just like, again, we're going to go back to processes. So unfortunately, this might be a little boring, but understand, try to think about think about what attackers are trying to get into. If they're trying to get money, or if they're trying to get access to something else in your company, try to put things in between the attacker and them getting access to whatever thing they're asking for. If they're looking for like a wire, and maybe you as a person who they've targeted somebody that does typically handle wires, they got the right person. But think about like the company who has no process with like wiring money. They just get the email and then they wire the money, or they do something, they send the money out. And then think about another org who may have a process with that, and it's like it requires a couple steps. Like, okay, I'll get the wire request. I've got to check with XYZ people. I have to check with them not only over email, but I have to check with them through a call or some kind of other physical check-in, just to make sure that they are actually requesting what they're requesting. And then also, like, that kind of goes hand in hand with the customers that you're serving as well. Maybe there's some kind of process that you want to put in between the customer and the email. If you're some kind of maybe healthcare provider or something, and one of your customers want access to their data, don't make it so you don't just email that data over regular email. Make it so that they have to sign into some kind of portal or something. Like, I know that's a big step, but like, just think about other things you can put in the way of accessing that important data, and just like getting it outside of just email authentication. You can't trust anybody over just email anymore. So that's the biggest takeaway, is like, no more implicit trust. Just like, think about anybody requesting you for something, like have them go through additional checks and like additional processes to get access to the things they're looking for.
And in the same way that we do awareness training with our internal teams, I think there's a certain amount of drip feeding that in communications that businesses can do. Personally, I love to see it in banking or financial communications, where they say, we will never ask you for your account number via email. If you ever have questions, please contact our support line. You can find it on the website. I think that those are great call outs to just kind of weave into customer communications. One, because you never know which time people are going to read it. And two, it's less likely that genuinely good advice to avoid being scammed is going to appear in the inauthentic email that's trying to get people to not follow that process. So it can also be a smaller indicator of genuineness.
Yeah, it's great messaging to keep throughout, like the communications with your customers, because training them on bad habits is really hard to recover from. I see it like in the emails and text messages for like 2FA, right? It'll say it in there. It'll say it in their normal communications. If they get bank statements, if they get things in the mail, like it'll be the same consistent communication throughout. So they're kind of covering their bases all over the place.
And also, I thought it was interesting that they specifically noted that the tactics are improving, but the amount of reports is dropping. And I thought it would be interesting to take a look at that. Does that mean that we're finding out about less of these earlier on? Is it that, there are fewer attacks, but going after people more consistently? We're seeing an increase in people being targeted multiple times. What are folks' thoughts on that?
Yeah, used to it, and like, I almost think it, wonder if it's a clerical thing. Like, maybe these reports are still being reported, they're just going to a different bucket. Like, I think as time goes on, we, in terms of a security community, have gotten better at like understanding metrics, and like one of those things is just like understanding like where, like how much ransomware is increasing and all that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering if these phishing reports are still being reported, but just winding up in a different bucket because we've got a million different buckets nowadays. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. Like, I don't think there's a drop in crime. I mean, maybe we like to think that, but I don't think that's realistic. So there's definitely like more going on. I just think it's like a clerical thing.
Mm.
It's summertime. They all took the summer off.
Right?
No crime summer 2025.
The heat scared them away.
It's brat actor summer this year. Moving on, we've got a zero-click AI flaw in Copilot. Dubbed EchoLeak, this is the first known zero-click that allows exfiltration from Copilot without any user interaction. This was initially reported by AIM Labs to Microsoft in January. It was fixed in May, server-side by Microsoft, and is now being disclosed. I included this story for a couple of reasons. First off, I liked that it was making reference to OWASP's new top 10 for AI weaknesses. This one touched on LLM 01, 02, and 03 being prompt injection, sensitive data exposure, and data/model poisoning, respectively. The way that this flow would work, an email would be sent to the target, which in its text had a hidden prompt embedded. Because that prompt is in normal human language, it would bypass Microsoft's XPIA, which is their cross-prompt injection attack classifier. When Copilot gets asked a question and goes to look at email contents as relevant context, then that hidden prompt is run by the Retrieval and Augmented Generation Engine, or RAG, as relevant. And then that prompt puts the data into either a specially crafted link using Teams or SharePoint, because those are trusted services and links are allowed, or encoded in an image. This is a 9.3 CVSS rating, an info disclosure vulnerability in Copilot, allowing data exfiltration. Their mitigations: you can strengthen prompt injection filters, you can implement granular input scoping, applying some post-processing filters to block external links or structured data. You can configure RAG engine to exclude external comms, and you can monitor for malicious prompts in email content before they reach the level of AI context. So I think a lot of sanitization tools that we've seen are usually looking for non-natural language patterns, like escape strings for a cross-site scripting attack. This poses a little bit more of an issue because a hidden prompt can be written very much in similar language to how someone may genuinely communicate, although the aim may be different. There's some mitigation measures that were included in that advisory, but do we have any other tips on how organizations can start thinking about getting in front of stopping prompt injections like this one? I think we're only going to see it increase over time.
Yeah, I think we just take the L on this one. No, it's so hard. Like, AI is evolving so quickly and it's hard to keep tabs on everything. I think the biggest thing is just understanding that it exists, and you have to think about how it has access to your data. Because like the problem right now, at least in my eyes, is like it's evolving so quickly, so we don't really know what it, like, how to defend ourselves against it. But I think on the other side of the coin, like, I don't think many orgs are helping us a lot to help defend ourselves from it. Like, if there were a way for me to like understand like what access Copilot has to all of my company data in Microsoft 365, like that might exist. I don't know off the top of my head, but like I feel like maybe that might not exist. But like that's the kind of thing. Like we're developing AI so fast that we're also like the defense against it is not developing nearly as fast as it. So it's a tough thing to kind of address. But I would just say like knowing that AI exists, like asking the questions like what access, like what data can I have access to? Is there a way I can shut off AI entirely from my company? And you should also have like a dedicated SOP for your employees. Like what AIs are they allowed to use? How are they allowed to use them? Like being quiet about these things is not going to solve the issue, but like communicating and like discussing and at least knowing they exist and like what kind of access they have to your data is like the first step, in my opinion. I don't have much better advice than that, but yeah, at least starting with that would be good.
Like removing the barriers to entry for people to use it also. Like there's a million of them out there in every platform we use now. And setting up something that you know is like in a walled garden that you can control, but you can make it easy access for your employees, so they tend to use the easiest solution, and it gives you a little bit more control rather than just like randomly using whatever one they decide to pull up.
Once again, asking people to sign my petition to change the security pyramid of confidentiality, integrity, and availability to a table and adding usability to it. I haven't made a whole lot of progress. I think that the list of signatories so far is at 1, but we're holding out hope there.
I think to add to what Jake and Amanda are saying, like from a 10,000 foot view, if you can't control it, control what it touches and put things in place around it, whatever barriers you possibly can, just to mitigate risks there.
And as we go to wrap up for this week, as I mentioned, I liked this story because it was a chance to highlight that OWASP had released a top 10 list for dealing with vulnerabilities or weaknesses within large language models. I think these are great resources for folks to stay up to date on and reflect on regularly. But for folks that may be less educated or aware of what vulnerabilities exist out there, what are some tips, given that we have folks that have done a lot of self-education on these risks out there? What are some tips on how teams can make use of resources like this to educate themselves and better try and mitigate these risks?
Yeah, I actually read through this LLM top 10 list from OWASP, and I think the best thing is what I really like is it grounds the security in a way. Like I think my biggest difficulty when I was first starting in security was like, I know all these topics, I know all these ideas, but like I don't know how they like actually like work in like an environment, or like I don't know how to apply them. But I think this top 10 list was super valuable to give me an idea of like, okay, here's the thing we're talking about. Here's where it can be abused. Here's what you can do to try to protect yourself from those things. So it helps add like a lot of foundation there that I think is super valuable.
That's going to run us short on time for this week. Once again, I want to thank everybody who joined to check us out this week. Hopefully these stories were helpful for you. If you'd like to hear us chat about another story that you saw, you can add it in the comments. We can take a look at it to add, not to next week's session, because next week is 2 days before Freedom and Barbecue and Fireworks. So we are not going to be having a briefing session, but we will be back on the 11th with a new update. I also want to thank our panel, Jake, Amanda, Taylor. Thanks for taking time out of your busy days to share a little bit of your expertise. Please, audience, do all of the keywords that YouTube likes to hear: liking, sharing, subscribing, bell, doobly-doo, all of those things. And until next time, everybody, please stay safe out there.